Morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you happen to be. For me, it's morning. But for our special guest here today, who's in the UK, it's late afternoon. It's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I think. And for Natalie, our founder, Natalie Armstrong-Motan, it's 5 o'clock. She's in France. And I hear that it's pouring rain over there. So the day is dawning here in Los Angeles. We're very lucky today to have a very different, unique type of speaker for Will Work for Food, the New Possibilities Hour. And I'm sure you'll find her very interesting. Dr. Lucy Ryan. She recently had a book published on, and it's for sale on Amazon, among other places. She is let's see here, let me look at her bio here. Lucy's been Dr. Ryan has been the managing director of Mindspring International for the last 20 years. She's trained, coached, and consulted with over 10,000 leaders in global blue chip companies across 29 countries. She's a very passionate person for women's professional development, helping organizations attract, retain, and promote their female leaders and gender-proof their succession plans. Noticing a trend in women leaving their corporate roles and in midlife, she led a unique 5-year doctoral research project exploring this phenomenon. And then that is what resulted in her 2023 book, Revolting Women, Why Midlife Women Walk Out and What to Do About It. And she'll tell us all about it when she's speaking. But basically, the topic today is professional women over 50 are faced with the triple whammy of discrimination. They're not male, they're not young or linear in their career paths. And as a result, they're leaving corporate life and taking their careers into their own hands more and more, taking their wisdom, etc., with them. So today, Dr. Ryan is going to talk to us about this, her research, her findings, and what it is. I'm sure that we all know women who have, and men, but this focus is on the women who've left their careers midlife, mid-career, and can think about that. And so I'm sure this will be very edifying. Dr. Ryan's food bank is the Trussell Trust, and Natalie has put the link into the chat for you. As of today, we've been told of donations to food banks around the world of $576,954.71. We're getting so close to that $600,000 number, and I can see a million we're just right around the corner. It's just amazing. Thank you all so much for your generosity, the generosity of our many, many speakers, and the generosity of our wonderful audiences. So thank you again. And with that, let me turn it over to Dr. Ryan. And if you might just tell us a little bit about your food bank choice and suggestion, and then the floor is yours.
Amazing. Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you for inviting me. Hello, everyone. And yeah, Trussell Trust runs the food banks, a lot of the food banks in the UK. So that's what I chose. That's why I chose it. They're an amazing charity and they do fantastic work for food banks. So I thought they deserved your donations today. Okay, so Jean and Natalie, do you want me to take this over and run with it?
Just go ahead and run with it. Thank you.
Okay, amazing. And I'm hoping that David might manage this, because I'm seeing he's tried to get on here 1, 2, 3, 4 about 6 times. So hopefully he makes it soon. All right. Here's what I thought. We've got about 20 of us on the call. If you fancy putting your cameras on, that's great. Then I can see you. Please feel free to make this interactive. We have kind of 50 minutes together. And what I will do is I'll run through a series of slides after I've kind of talked a bit about this subject. And I will also have about 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. But if you've got a burning question as we go along, please feel free to ask it. I'll manage our time. That's no problem whatsoever. Now, I'm aware this subject is probably unusual, unusual for you. Give me some idea, pop into chat whether you know what you do for a living, whether you're a lawyer, mediator, or manager, leader. That will give me a feel for what we've got in the room as we go along. But let me give you some history as to why I chose to study this, so you'll know what's kind of going on. So exactly a decade ago, I turned 50. And I decided to do a PhD, as you do. And I was curious. One of the drivers is that I was really curious about 3 clients of mine who were leaving Eve, Eve, Laurie, Kristin, they were leaving jobs just at the critical moments of their career. Eve was a senior mental health worker. Laurie was a talent director in a global equity firm. And Kristin was an HR director in one of the UK's biggest media companies. And they'd gone through all the normal kind of battles, maternity, sexism, hurdles. And then just as they were at the point of stepping up, they left. So I thought, this is really unusual, I thought. And so I turned to business literature, I turned to academic papers, and what I found was a big, fat silence about this subject. Do you know, there were a total of 3 academic papers about professional women at midlife in the whole area. So I thought, well, that's it. That's a good subject for a PhD. Hey, you have to prove that there's a gap in the literature. And that wasn't hard to prove. So I touted round this PhD proposal about the experience of professional women at midlife. And I got rejected by university after university who said it was uninteresting, unpublishable, uninspiring. Indeed, one professor said to me, "No one, dear, wants to read about old women." So I thought, oh, okay, well, I do. So I kept going, found a supervisor, studied it for 4.5 years, and found that those 3 clients of mine were absolutely not a lot anomalies. In fact, they were they highlighted the 3 big reasons that women exit organizations at the kind of top of their careers. And I'm hoping it'll resonate with some of you. But firstly, we should just quickly discuss whether or not there is a problem, because that's often what's chucked at me. Because certainly in the UK, and I know in the US, for example, and in France, we've got women on our airwaves, our radio airwaves. We've got some senior political figures. We've had in the UK a couple of disastrous female prime ministers. We've got some great business leaders who are female. So it leaves rise to people going, well, is there a problem? There absolutely is. In the US, there's just been a big study that says for every female director aged between 45 and 55 promoted, 2 are leaving. And that starts to understand the stagnancy we've got at the top of organizations. For example, in the UK, just 8% of CEOs are female, and 14% of employed executives are female. Globally, 26% of senior leaders are female. And are kind of 40, when a board says they've got gender parity, it's usually made up of non-executive directors, female non-executive directors or trustees, not employed executives. So, you know, we've got a problem here. We've got a stagnancy that's not changed since I started studying it 10 years ago. So let me walk you through, unless there's any questions right now, in which case pop up your hand. Let me walk you through what the 3 reasons that women leave. So let me share the screen and walk you through those. Here we go. Now, let me start here to try and understand this issue of women leaving, or why there was a stagnancy at the top of organisations. For the first time in 2020, the government went out to senior men and asked them why they thought women weren't, senior middle-aged women weren't being promoted up. Here were some of their answers. I don't think women fit. There aren't many women around. Women don't want the hassle. The good ones have been snapped up. And my favourite that makes me both laugh and cry is number 7. We've already got one, thanks, so we're done. And so they, you know, we started to see, you know, this was 2020, for goodness sake. This wasn't, you know, 50 years ago. So we started to see why there were so many issues. But that didn't start to really explain, well, it started to explain part of the reason why women left, but not all of it. So here are the 3 reasons that I found from all my research as to why midlife women walk out: gendered ageism, midlife collision, and revolt. So let's go through these and see what they actually mean. Now, gendered ageism is starting to become quite a trendy word. Here's what it means. It's when ageism meets sexism. And when companies talk about having a diversity and inclusion agenda, they often leave out age. Yet, many of you will recognise that most organisations and firms are designed for the young. In fact, legal firms in the UK and often management accountants, chartered accountants, are some of the worst offenders of prizing youth in their organisation. You know, some demand that you leave at 50 or 55, and all their budgets go into recruiting in younger people, cheaper people, and the wealth and the experience leaks out at the top. So gendered ageism is when that mixes, that you're not young, and we believe that creativity and energy sits with young people. I don't, but that's the kind of normal speak. We have a model where older men are prized. You know, they're seen as kind of George Clooney types, all kind of fine wines and white hair, whereas older women are not often seen in the same light. In fact, only last week someone said to me, how brave of you to present with white hair. I was kind of, I hadn't really thought of it. I like my white hair. I'd never thought of it in terms of courage. So I thought it was a really peculiar comment. The other thing is that's gendered ageism is many women, not all, but many women have not followed a linear career path. What they've had is a zigzag path. They've stepped out, they've stepped in, they've stepped out, they've stepped in. And what you therefore find is their CVs don't either look linear. Often they've not had the international experience of their male colleagues. And often their CVs don't look the same. So that's a starting point, really, of gendered ageism. But also, let's think about language. Now, I don't know if you can think of a single positive word to describe an older woman. Let me know if you do, because they've been known throughout history as hags, crones, witches, old maids, spinsters. And in my study, women were called all of this: blockers, also-rans, frigid old cows, older aunts, throwbacks, fuddy-duddies, or all to their faces. And what struck me hugely when I spoke to these women is they didn't receive this language with a kind of fury. They received it with a resigned shrug. Oh, yes. And I was struck by the sense that they're used to they're used to this. They don't see this as unusual. So gendered ageism can be overt and covert. When it's overt, it's very subtle. So you'll often find that older women are not suddenly leading projects. They're not thought of as cutting edge. They're not thought of as the future. And so they're sidelined often. When it's more covert, they're just sacked. They're just whacked out of organizations and paid off. And there are plenty of examples of those. So that's the first reason women leave, is gendered ageism. And that's a sense of either having to leave or being forced to leave. Now, the second reason, big reason, that women leave organizations is what I called in my book the midlife collision. Now, at midlife, as I'm sure many of you will recognize, particularly if you're kind of post 45, men have this too, by the way, but there are some differences for women. There's a unique collision of stuff, from menopause, bereavement, to older motherhood, to elder care, to caring for partners, siblings, to coping with grief. And as one of the women I interviewed said, midlife feels like a whirlwind that can scoop you up, leaving you breathless. Now, any one of those things are tricky. But the thing is they often come together. And particularly caring for our parents. You'll know, all of you, if you had younger children or have younger children, you'll know that it's easy to do kind of swapping in or out. I remember kind of neighbours, things like that. You have my kids, I'll have your kids, I'll have yours into tea, you can have mine for a sleepover, I'll pop them into a nursery, you can do, there was this whole network of helping each other manage kids. When you come to your parents with dementia, it's deeply lonely. There's no swapping in or out. There's just calls in the middle of the night to go and help. And I speak from experience. 3 of my 4 parents and in-laws had dementia, and all 3 have sadly now died. But my husband and I spent at least 10 years going up and down the motorways in the middle of the night, suddenly having to leave work when you got a call to do it. Now, all of that you can cope with if you've got a degree of flexibility in your workplace. But when you've got that on top of the menopause, on top, sometimes I found a lot of women I interviewed had teenagers with mental health issues, which is on the rise at the moment. So what you found is that care became this huge trigger. And if you think of some of these statistics, 92% of women take the lead in caring for the family. So it's not that men don't face a midlife collision. They don't face it with the intensity that that women do. 50% of the women I interviewed had one or more parent with dementia they were actively caring for. So in terms of care, it's a very big issue that demands quite a lot of help, if you like, and flexibility. Okay, let's go on to the third reason that women leave, which is revolt. Hence, my book was called Revolting Women. And this is the sense that women are demanding or needing flexibility. Indeed, there are plenty of studies that say it's 16 times more important, flexibility, than status or money by the time you get to middle age, because of exactly what we're describing. So these are women who are revolting against what I call the full-time foolishness of the workplace, which is, if you can't help me redefine career success in a different way, by God, I'll redefine it for myself. And I will make this work in a different way. It's why we have so many new businesses started by women over 50 that, by the way, have extremely high success rates. And this is the nature of revolt. Now, what I found in midlife is that there are actually 3 phases that people go through: to stop, to pause, to change. So this nature of collision is a time when all these pressures come together, and you'll find a lot of women like Eve, Laurie, Kristin all go, whoa, for 3 different reasons. Eve was bullied mercilessly in the workplace and just resigned. Laurie was looking after her mum, who had heart disease and was given a year to live. And she had twins, and one of them had anorexia. And although her husband was actually caring, she just felt an urgent need to be with both of them. And Kristin, her mum had died when she was 54. And Kristin was 53 at the time when I interviewed her. And she had this sense of revolt, which is that I don't know how many years I have left in a good working career, but oh my God, I'm going to make the most of it. And that's not staying put at my firm. And actually, she left. She did a PhD in creativity, and she's presenting at her first conference next week. So the sense of needing to stop, then to pause. When we look inwards, we're coping, we're understanding the nature of care, we're looking inwards. Then there's a third stage, which is to change, to look outwards, to wonder what next, to embrace newness, and to revolt. And I've come to understand that actually very commonly men and women have different career clocks. And it comes back to this nature of linear career paths, in that when you have spent an entire career managing to stay in a linear career path and working your way steadily up, By the time you get to 55, 60, it's like, I'm getting out of here and I'm going to retire, I'm going to volunteer, I'm going to rest, or I'm going to give back in some way. What you find with a lot of women is they're going, I'm not hitting the golf course, I'm hitting my stride here. I've gone in, out, in, out. And they get to round about something like 55, 60, and they're not wanting to volunteer. They're going, I've spent a lifetime caring for others. I'm now going to look after myself. And I have energy, ambition, creativity, resilience. And you know what? I want to step up. And 70% of the women I interviewed actually wanted to step up. They didn't want to step down. They wanted to step up. So before I talk through some potential solutions, let me just see if there are any questions here.
Lucy, this is
Yeah.
Jean.
Hi, Jean.
What exactly are you defining as midlife? Is it 50 and above or younger?
45, typically 45 to 65.
You know, I was giving a presentation many years ago, and a part of that was at the ages of, I think it was 40 maybe to 60, give or take, maybe 45, but I really think it's hit about 40 for your prime earning years. And this was for a long term. So I find that interesting what you're talking about there.
Exactly. You know, these are women, you know, once you're kind of 45 and you've got through some of the career hurdles, these are often women, absolutely, Jean, hitting the peak of earnings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Elaine, you had your hand up?
Elaine.
Yeah. What were the three phases you talked about? Was it the situation? Well, anyway, would you review those three phases?
Of course I will. To stop, to pause, to change.
Okay.
So to stop where at the point of collision, Elaine, we go, okay, and I just have to take a stop here.
Mhm.
One of the difficulty or the sad things, Elaine, about it, I noticed with the women I interviewed at that point of stop, is that it was temporary. They didn't want to stop forever. They just needed to stop for whatever reason. Then number two is to pause, which is I just need to cope with whatever I'm coping through, whether it is kids, whether it's parents, whether it's being bullied out of the workplace, whether it is menopause or own ill health, whatever it is. That's the going inwards, the pause.
Okay.
And then step three is to change,
Okay.
which is, okay, I'm ready again to look outwards. I'm ready to embrace newness and look outwards here.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have another question for you, a quick question.
Mm.
In your studies, did you find something along the lines of this, that women tend to think that there's more that they want to do and they want to have and try so many different things?
Yeah.
There's only so much time.
Without a doubt, Jean. And I think that what's so interesting about midlife is we suddenly get that recognition, like Kristen, whose mum died at 54. We suddenly get that recognition of, oh my God, I might have 10, 20, 30 years left, or, you know, I really want to make the most of it. And particularly if we've just faced some sort of bereavement, it's quite, it's an eye-opener, it's quite shocking, and it gives us this kind of carpe diem moment, which is, okay, come on, I'm not just going to stay put and do this for the rest of my life. Quite linked with grief. And we don't know that. We don't recognize how linked that stepping out is with grief. Let me just finish some of these slides with some ideas. And if you can just jot down some questions, I'll come back to you all again in about 5, 6 minutes. So let's just start here. What I'm always asked about is, well, what do we do about this? And let's talk about it because you come from all stages, those of you listening, leading, managing, or just, individuals. So let's just start here, and something here I hope will resonate. The biggest thing that can happen that needs to happen for a positive agenda for change is that we have to take the issue seriously. Unless we take the issue seriously, what I found certainly since publishing my book and speaking to, probably about 3,000 people over the last 4 months, is that a lot of people will pay lip service and go, oh, that's really interesting. And then we just go back to doing what we've always done. So the first stage of change is actually for any firm and any organization to choose to take it seriously. That means they check their data and the exit points. They run listening exercises and find out why women leave. Leaders need to become vocal, visible advocates for gender equality and for age, and they put age on the diversity agenda. And they talk about it within their senior leadership meetings. And they encourage sponsorship and mentorship for women, particularly just at that level. I call it C-suite -2, but at the senior level, -1 or 2 levels. And to explore what flexibility or what job sharing, much underestimated, looks like. For managers of teams, I think one of the big things is to build that trust and psychological safety within a team. That's one of the only ways that we actually call out gendered ageism, is to actually build the psychological safety to be able to talk about these issues and talk about bullying or talk about language. And the so-called banter, well, we're just going to go and talk about football, we're just going to go and talk about this, managing that kind of banter and calling it out. And we need to have training programs that encourage creative ambition. It's exactly as Jean was saying earlier, women get to midlife and they don't just stop. They've got all these things they want to do. My mum is 95, by the way, and she started work as a radio DJ at 90. She's incredible. And she wrote, at 85, she wrote and published 3 children's books. And at 80, she took up watercolor painting. So every 5 years, she's kind of reinvented herself. And I don't know what 100 will lead to, but it's always unexpected. I think that, also if you manage a team, one of the easiest things to do is to have a collaborative discussion. Show the recording of something like this to your team. And so you're reading podcasts, you're reading articles, and lead a discussion about gendered ageism or midlife collision, and so that the team know that you care. And if it's just you don't manage, you don't lead, then what I would say is at least take this issue seriously yourself and take action. I am a massive fan of what's called microfeminism, which is, I love it. And it's realizing how much in your language it's following the language of men. So, for example, if we say, I've just been to the doctor, we can often say, oh, what did he say? And we use he, I've just, the teacher, the doctor, the CEO. the lawyer. Everyone goes, oh yeah, well, what did they say? What did he say? So microfeminism is saying she before he. When you dress an envelope, it's saying Mrs. and Mr. And it sounds silly, but the minute you try it, if it's weird, you'll know how used you are to the other way round. And if you have kids, get them doing it too. If you're in any organization you're in, start a company network. In England, they're called employee resource networks or employee support groups. Start one for either parental care or for aging. And please be a male or female ally or advocate, which means build awareness, attend events, advocate for the older women in your company so they know that you care. And above all, let's just kind of drive what I call this sparkle of female genius. That photo in the middle, by the way, that's my mum in the middle and my sister and my daughter, either side of them. Because our aim really is to have women at all ages seen, heard, developed, engaged, and rewarded. So let me stop share here and let me hear exactly, let me hear your questions or comments.
I've got a question, Lucy.
Yeah.
Hi. I'm probably at
Hi,
the
Claire.
younger end. I'm Claire. I work for a media company. I'm in a sort of unusual position in that I think I'm probably one of the oldest people in the company. And in terms of what you were saying about advocating
Yeah.
this as an area, like what if you are the only one? Do you know of any kind of female mentorship schemes? Because it's kind of something where I'm kind of, I'm sat there alone essentially. It's something that we're looking as a company at, kind of this issue of diversity in the workforce, gender, but age hasn't been brought into it. And there's kind of, I
Okay.
want to advocate for that now because there will be a whole host of people coming up behind me. But in terms of also for me, where would I go to? Because actually, I think I could really do with that kind of that female leadership and that kind of support. I'm just wondering if there's kind of other places to draw from.
There are you in the UK, Claire?
Yeah.
Yeah, you sound like you are. There aren't very good mentor schemes in the UK, but I'm just about to start one. So if you link in with me, I'm just joining up with Noon to start an organization called Noon. Do you know Noon?
Well, I just put in the chat earlier about Queenager.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
it's a positive
yeah.
word.
So I've linked in with Eleanor, is it? I think that
Yes.
yeah. So I do know Noon. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. So we're looking at a mentor scheme together.
Okay.
And so that's one. The other thing is to most of my clients who are looking for a mentor literally ask, they look at women, senior women in organizations they admire, and then they ask around.
Yeah. That's what I was planning to do,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah,
kind of somebody who knows so much about it. I thought I
no,
would
most of the mentor schemes I know of are in-house. And the other thing to start doing is run an in-house sponsorship scheme. So what we know is sponsorship. Mentorship is great to feel less alone, particularly what I know with certainly a lot of the women I work with is they feel enormously isolated. They're often the only senior woman or the oldest woman or the only one on the board, and they feel incredibly isolated. And but what we know is sponsorship is even more important. And that requires the men in your organization agreeing to act as sponsors to women at manager and leader level within the organization, Claire. And I've got one client where that's been incredibly successful. And 70% of the women on that program, that sponsorship program, have stepped up. And it's actually required the men to become allies in it. So I would look at both ways around, Claire.
Okay, thank you.
What I would say, Natalie, is we need to remember that we're pioneers in this. You know, if you listen to Claire being, you know, the sole leader and probably the only oldest person in her organization, she looks pretty damn young to me. You know, we're pioneers here. And so, although, you know, like my mum is unbelievably resilient, but she didn't work very much and she didn't struggle to rise up to a senior leadership position. It's this generation now who are just knocking down some barriers, and it is hard because we're new. So we're the kind of suffragettes of the new generation. But it is stagnant, Natalie. I cannot pretend that we've made a lot of headway, and post-pandemic, a lot of the figures have gone backwards. And what happened is women returned to the house and everyone went, oh, lovely having you home. And they've struggled to get back out again. I've seen the other hand there, and I don't know how to pronounce your name. Alba? Alva.
Yeah. And my question was in relation to, this is something I'm seeing and I'm kind of going like, how do you de-escalate this? It's kind of this idea of, if you start talking about some of these items, it's immediately trying to escalate the thing and say, so is there an accusation of sexism here? Are you accusing us of discrimination, when you're kind of trying to bring it back to, can we have a conversation about this? So any advice on that, or is that something that you're seeing? I'm seeing that particularly in relation to, as you say, since the start of the pandemic, say a push back on flexible working and that type of thing. So just interested in your views on that.
Are you asking, Alba, whether are you asking how we introduce this topic to an organization so that we're not going, hey, I think there's sexism going on? Are you asking how we introduce it?
I think so. And
Okay.
if you have introduced
Yeah.
it,
I
is there a way? And I'm conscious,
I'm
kind of saying,
yeah.
like, yeah, yes, please.
I tend not to go in going, hell, I think there's gendered ageism or sexism going on here, because then I'm never going to get male allies alongside me, and I need them as much as anyone. I tend to go in through a listening exercise. So I tend to go into an organization going, let's do a midlife check-in. Let's listen to your women and let's see what they say. And it's a much gentler but more profound way of doing it. Because women feel heard, they're enormously outspoken, and everyone learns through it. So I would start through a midlife check-in or a listening exercise, rather than going in the direct route that you then find you have to de-escalate, because what you have is enormous levels of defensiveness going, we're not sexist. So I would go in on the desire to understand first.
Dr. Ryan, this has been just a fantastic presentation. I think that, again, these are conversations that those of us in midlife or quickly headed toward our dotage, we've had these conversations around the dinner table. We've had these conversations around, you know, the water cooler, so to speak, in our jobs. we've had these conversations, hopefully with our daughters, so that things are easier for them, better for them. And I hope that we have listened to our mothers and our grandmothers and learned from them so that we can do better for ourselves. Again, the name of the book that Dr. Ryan is talking about all of this research from is Revolting Women. I hope that you log on to Amazon.com. I hope too that you support the Trustful Trust Food Bank, or the food bank that is near and dear to your heart. If you don't have a dollar to spare, please consider donating an hour or more of your time as a volunteer to support your local friends, neighbors, people in need. Dr. Ryan, this has been an absolutely stunning presentation. I have loved every moment of
So glad,
listening to
Natalie.
you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. We look forward to you continuing your research and coming back to talk to us with much better data.
I look forward to it too, trust me, Natalie.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.